tapesa eko iba na mbeleko na nina maana kukwambia jana usiku
100 years ago. Nobody in this country was wearing bra. 100 years ago, nobody was wearing trousers. Nobody was wearing, excuse me, underwear. So you get these items from outside, and then we create ones. And mostly, for the ones that I mentioned, we have borrowed. When we talk about borrowing, non-linguists wonder why we call it borrowing, as if we are going to return. In Kitharaka, the language that I speak, the language that I spoke when I was a child, a blanket is called Murengeti, a car is called Nkare, a school is called Chukuru, what I'm wearing here is called Shati, and my trousers is borrowed from, the one. It's not the trousers. No, the trousers I bought. It's the one that we borrowed from Kiswahili, and we say Suruari. The languages have also acquired new ones for new institutions. In other words, Kenyan languages have also acquired new ones for new institutions. So we have a word, every person sitting here, whether you speak Luya, or you speak Maasai, or you speak Imbere, you speak Chindigo, or you speak Okiek, you have a word for, Anges, school, you have a word for office, you have a word for church, although these institutions are newly introduced in the country through colonialism. New functions also, when there are new functions in culture, I guess you see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say culture influences language. That when culture changes, with it changes also the language. So new functions such as baptism and weddings have led to the introduction of new ones into the local languages. So I believe all the Kenyan languages spoken in this room have a one for wedding and they have a one for baptism. Now, another dimension, ladies and gentlemen, another dimension of the relationship between language and culture is that it is speculated that language structure can and does influence culture. I was talking about culture influencing language. Now I want to talk about language influencing culture. It's a symbiotic kind of reciprocal relationship. It has been claimed that we see the world and behave according to how our mother languages or primary languages have programmed our minds. So when you hear people talking about the importance of African languages, saying that we should master African languages before we master foreign languages, they're actually saying that we should enable ourselves to see things through our lenses rather than seeing them through other people's lenses, because that is what happens when we master the languages before mastering ours. So as a linguist, if you ask me whether it's right for us to teach kindergarten and primary one children Mandarin, I would say no. Let them master Luya, the Luo, Somali, Boran first, and then you can teach the Mandarin when they're in Form 1. Before that, let them learn to see life, to view, to have the point of view that is shaped by their own universe, so to speak. Now, the views about the influence of language on thought, world view, and culture in general are called Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. This is a hypothesis that was started a long time ago in 1929 in Yale University by a linguist called Sapir, and then after that, his student called Whorf also added some thoughts into it, and it has been debated ever since. It's the relationship between culture and the language. And therefore, because the convener told me to talk about culture and the language, I guess he won't complain to me after I end my speech, because I have done his meeting. Now, this hypothesis, Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, has two versions. There's what is called the strong version, otherwise called linguistic determinism. And this linguistic determinism says that the language totally programs our own view. That how you see a word, how you understand the word, how you behave is determined by the language that in which your mind was developed. Now, a weaker version is called linguistic relativity, and it simply says, yeah, language influences the mind. Language, but it's not totally. So the strong version, determinism, it says that we just see life and the universe from the way we have been programmed by language. The weaker version says, well, no, I mean it influences to some extent, but it's not a total influence. Now, let me talk about language and morality. Well, I use the word morality in my own way, because remember I told you I have no intention whatsoever to pretend to be a philosopher or to have read books in philosophy and to have understood, concepts in philosophy. So I use the word morality in the simplest way it is understood. The way people outside philosophy will understand it. That is a system of aspirations. If philosophers think this description is very good, of course you can incorporate it in your teaching, although it's from a lay person. Morality, the word morality is a system of aspirations and expectations that have evolved or consciously put in place by people to make society a conducive place to live in. The system is used to decide what is right and wrong. I'm sure Dr. Obur will like that. What we talk about a system of aspirations and expectations is what we use to say this something is wrong, this is right. And at some point I will comment that because I thought at some point Dr. Nyabur mixed and beats morality and law. No, sometimes they converge, but they are totally different, as I will show you. So society takes upon itself to defend and enforce some aspects of the system by force, if necessary. Society sometimes is ready to enforce morality using violence. Let me give you an illustration. If you're a man and you are caught, you are a mature man, and you are caught with some underage girl, some 14-year-old girl, and getting out some hotel room, if somewhere in Machakos, somewhere in Kisumu, somewhere in Mombasa, you know what? Not only are people going to call the police, probably before the police come, people will have lynched you. People will have beaten you up to enforce morality. It's immoral. It's immoral for an adult to go to bed with a 14, 15, 13-year-old girl. And vice versa. You are a woman, and you think you have seen a boy, 14 years, who has been playing raga that young, and you think you like his muscles, young as he is, people will lynch you. People, you will need the police to protect you. Why? Because society is willing to enforce morality even by violence. And the same happens with stealing. You have had so many cases of people being lynched because they have been caught stealing, and they are, people are not lynching you because of law. Those villagers are not thinking about the law. They are thinking about morality. The villagers lynching somebody, they are not there to enforce the law. They are there they're enforcing morality. The same thing with being violent with a parent. If you are so violent with a parent, and you actually you have the audacity of slapping your mother, people will come and probably start beating you also. They will not allow you. They will not condone you beating up your mother. It's not their mother, but probably they will enforce morality using violence. Now, morality and what is legal and illegal are not synonymous. However, they quite often converge. You remember I said at some point I thought the way Dr. Abur was talking, so morality and law are not one and the same thing. Let me illustrate. The examples I've given you, I'm sorry. Let me illustrate. Sleeping with your best friend's spouse is not illegal. You cannot take somebody to court for that. In law, it's perfect. In law, it's perfect. All that you have to prove, if somebody wanted you to prove anything, it will say we were two willing adults, full stop. But it's totally immoral. It's totally immoral. And this is why, if you found a man in your bedroom with your wife and you scream, the neighbors will come, not immediately to join you in screaming, but to assist you in beating up the man. They will be there to beat up the man. Why? Because what the man has done is not illegal, but it's immoral. And the evidences are there to enforce not law, but morality. Or, my friend, sometimes philosophers talk as if morality is something universal. Actually, what I would think is we can talk about meta-morality, into which all the moralities of different communities fit. Because in some communities, marrying off, just to show you the converse, something that is unlawful but morally acceptable. In some communities, marrying off a 15-year-old girl is accepted, but it's illegal. So the avengers will not beat you up, but if the chief, the police catch up with you, you will go to jail. So some things are immoral, but legal. Other things are illegal, but not immoral. Let me illustrate a set of aspirations and illustrations that are used to control language. I think the issue of language has been brought here. Somebody was asking what really is the language of morality and morality of language. I want to demonstrate the kind of moral conditions that we put in place to make language acceptable. You remember my layman's definition of morality is a set of norms that we put in place to make society habitable, more conducive for living. And therefore, we have strategies that will make language not offensive, that will make language not embarrassing, that will make language not demeaning, that will make language not inducing shock. Now, that strategy, in general, that principle is called euphemisms. So we have euphemisms that we use in society to ensure that we don't use language that is embarrassing, demeaning, demeaning, etc. Why? Because there are certain parts of the body that if you mention, people get embarrassed. Excuse me, I am talking like a teacher in class. I am not vulgar. I just want to demonstrate. You can't avoid talking about genitalia. You can't avoid talking genitalia. It's only that you have to talk about genitalia in a particular way, especially in certain contexts. So then we have euphemisms that describe discrete parts of the human body, certain body processes, certain body fluids, discrete places, certain body conditions, certain illnesses that have stigma attached to them, and of course, as you can see, I'm trying to keep as close as possible to sexualities. So we control language. So I don't know whether this is the kind of language that philosophers would want to refer to as a language of morality, but it's something that certainly makes language moral, so to speak. These strategies ensure that we don't use vulgar language. It means they help us not to use dirty language. Now, morally, these issues are controlled by imperatives, or rather, there are so many aspects of language. As we talk about language of morality, how language is used to control society, you find it within the structure of language itself. There are certain suffixes, there are certain grammatical structures, there are certain semantic dimensions that control language, but mostly it's just imperatives such as do not do this, do not say this, say that. You see? So, do not mention the male organ of a man, do not mention the male organ of a woman, say genitalia. Say genitalia. Except in some circumstances. Because language becomes dirty only in certain circumstances. When I'm a teacher, when you are in school, secondary school, when the teacher said, draw an automated triangle of the penis, she was not being vulgar. She was not being dirty. She was just being a biology teacher. When the doctor says, Mr. So-and-so, a gynecologist, Mr. So-and-so, we have examined your wife. Our fallopian tubes are okay, our uterus okay, but now we have to do sperm analysis. You don't say, oh my God, how can you mention the word sperm? But you can imagine somebody mention the word sperm in the cafeteria. Imagine you are just paying for your food in the cafeteria, and somebody says, "Oh, the sperm, the sperms, what was the sperms?" So in a hospital, it's perfect. In a hospital setting, it's perfect to talk about vagina, perfect to talk about penis, perfect to talk about menstruation, perfect to talk about orgasm. But outside that consulting room, you dare not use those terms because we sanction against them because of morality, so that society is not dirty. Now, if you allow me, ladies and gentlemen, I will just read you some euphemisms that are used in matters sexuality. So, for instance, in human genitalia and other taboo areas of the body, a penis is called private areas, private parts, genitals, prick, dick. You see? Vagina, which came to language as a euphemism because the original English word for that part of the woman body is cunt. C-U-N-T. Vagina came as a euphemism because people didn't want to say a word that would embarrass them. Even penis, as you can see, it's from Latin. It's not original Anglo-Saxon. So it also came as a euphemism, but now it has become so well known that people now have to look for other euphemism to say it. So for women, we talk about private areas. So if you hear somebody in Nyeri or Kirinyaga talking about Gechiari, or even Kenogo, I'm afraid Kenogo, they are talking about that part. So Gechiari, Kenogo. We don't talk about buttocks, we talk about behind or bottoms or derrière. In Kiswahili say makalio. So mtoto alipiwa na mwalimu makalio. Si kwamba mtoto alipiwa matako sana na mwalimu. Now human sex, which is part of sexuality, we say sexual intercourse is called having an affair with someone, having carnal knowledge with someone, to be with somebody. So, ukisikia Njoki wanaenda siku hizi Njoki wanaenda na Ouma, they are not just talking about walking on the streets. No, they are saying much more than that. Really, do not think that they are just walking between the library and the cafeteria. So to sleep with someone, to be between bed sheets with somebody, we call them when they were in bed sheets. The mother was beating the daughter, the mother was beating the son because he caught her between bed sheets with the neighbor's boy. You know what they were doing. They were not sleeping at all. So to do what and not to do, there are many times when young women, daughters, sons are beaten for what? What the mistake? If you ask the mother what has she done, I caught them doing what and not to do. And when you say that, you do understand what that means. We talk about being in a sexual relationship, being intimate with somebody, being in a sexually consenting situation, being in a compromising situation, and having sex with somebody who is not sanctioned by society, because if you did not know, it's society. It's society that says with whom you can sleep. You are just limited. You are just limited. It's society that decides whom you can go to bed with. That's why it doesn't matter how cute your sister is, it doesn't matter how cute your first cousin is, you are simply not going to date her. You see? So then having sex with a person other than to whom you are committed is called cheating. It's called cheating. It's called adultery. And when you say something is adultery, morally, it's wrong. When you say cheating, morally, you say it's wrong. You say, I'm not saying it's illegal. See, is this Nkatha? Nkatha? No. I thought it's my sister, Professor Wanju Kabira's daughter, Nkatha, who is a lawyer. I think that comment. Let me read this, and I'm glad that Isaac is still here. This is from a book. At the time, Becca had come to Mahate with a friend, Sundi, during the school vacations. There had been a dance or something that evening, and afterwards, Becca had taken her by the hand and led her outside. There, in the bush, behind the school house, he had taken away her innocence, sweating and fumbling awkwardly. Remember your first experience? Remember your first experience, and do not pretend that you don't know. Not pretend that you don't know what I'm talking about. So he took away her innocence, sweating and fumbling awkwardly. They are not being innocent then, because you can't say they had been virgins then. That's vulgar language. They are innocent then, feeling guilty. Why guilty? Because morally, your parents have told you that doing what these people have done is wrong. So this explains the guilt in these young people, especially the girl. It's wrong. So they had avoided each other for days after the incident. Then Becca had gone back to school, and they are not seeing each other till now. Yeah. So those are examples. Those are examples of euphemism. I would have read something about Mugabe's wife's story here, using the language of morality, a language of sexuality, but I don't think we have the time. Maybe just part. I will read a paragraph. You people are smiling. I will continue. If they are frowning, I will stop. Someone has been nibbling on President Mugabe's biscuit in the dark. This was in Grace Marufu. So someone has been, nibbling on the biscuit. You nibble like that. So someone has been nibbling on President Mugabe's biscuit in the dark. His most trusted friend and confidant Gideon Gono and his wife, according to recent news, have been having secret stimmy tries in his dairy farm under the pretext of checking out the cows. Talk about milking an opportunity. So, this is the kind. And, if you see this kind of language in a novel, you will buy it. Because it's a novel that you can leave on your table. Although you have daughters, teenage sons and daughters, it's not a big deal. The other book that you can never dare, unless you are keeping it under the mattress, because of moral issues. Because you don't want your son, your daughter to ask you, what is this? I mean, why should your daughter be concerned about somebody milking an opportunity? Thank you. I have no idea when he brought this. No idea at all. Or you brought together, the two of them together? I never. Because I am together to the juicy part about sexualities. Oh my God. Yeah. Very quickly. So just give me some 10 minutes. Now, about sexualities, what I've done, because I said I'm not an expert, what I did, I said, well, as a researcher, when I try to get some data from which you can make inferences, some data. And there are a number of ways of researching on a topic like this. One is self-confession, where you go around with a questionnaire saying, you ask a man, would you, are you asexual or are you sexual? You say sexual. Do you sleep with women or men? You say women. You don't sleep with men because you wouldn't do it, or because you haven't gotten an opportunity. On and on. So, another way of doing this is to get that person data and say, excuse me, madam, do you know of a woman who sleeps with another woman? Do you know a man who sleeps with another man? Do you know a man who sleeps with both men and women? Do you know a woman who sleeps with both women and men? That's what I'm saying, that person information. The other way is just scanning the language. The other way is looking, tapping from the reservoir of language. And ladies and gentlemen, what I did, I decided to go with the third option, and I developed some questionnaire. Question number one, does your language have the one for sex? Number two, does your language have a one for sex between man and woman? Number three, does your language have a one for relationship between two men? Number four, does your language have a sexual relationship between two women? Number five, what is the one in your language for a gay man? What is the one for a gay woman? What is the one for a man who plays the role of a woman in a sexual relationship with another man? What is masturbation? That's part of sexuality. What is masturbation? What do you call a man who masturbates? What do you call a woman who masturbates? What do you call a man who plays the role of a woman in a sexual relationship with another man? On and on and on. And I tested this with five languages. Luhya, Kisa, variety of Luhya, with the Ekigusi, with the Luo, with Kiswahili, and Arabic. Because I have no other way of really knowing sexualities other than using this method as a linguist. I say, I am not a psychologist, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not even sure that I can devise a good questionnaire, for a sociologist. So then, what I want to give you is to give you feedback and to make inferences, without Kizza Kwambedi saying about African sexuality. As you can see, these languages are Kenyan. when I was told about African sexualities, it's so ambitious. What is Africa, really? What is Africa? Is Egypt and Kenya part of the same continent? Geographically, yes. Geographically, yes. But culturally, does Egypt and Kenya didn't belong together? Of course not. Does Inasimiyu in Chwele have much in common with Fatma in Nigeria, other than for the fact that both of them, there are some processes that affect women, whether they are, etc. So very quickly, let me give the answers then. In Kigusi, there is a word for sex, which is not surprising because sex is intrinsically interwoven with reproduction. All languages will have one for sex, unless they don't reproduce children. Because something that we have done over and over again, surely we must have a one for it. You see? So in Kigusi, they have a word, okororana, kemobere. Well, let me say they have a word. And sex between a man and a woman, again, they have a word there. Sex intercourse between man and woman, they have a word. And then sexual relationship between two men, no equivalent. This is the questionnaire. They say no equivalent. Sexual relationship between two women, no word in Kigusi. A gay man, no equivalent in Kigusi. A gay woman, no equivalent in Kigusi. A man who plays the role of a woman in a sexual relationship with another, no equivalent. Masturbation, yes. Some people masturbate in Kiroka and Nyamira. Yeah. Excuse me, they masturbate in Baraka. I thought we met to talk about sexualities. What has happened now? What has happened? You see now, African sexualities don't allow people to talk about sex openly? Do you see? So I should, well, people masturbate in my, should I say my village? I don't know. Well, maybe, whatever it is. So I will be done, ladies and gentlemen. I did apologize. I did apologize. And then I've gone to Luya, Kisa, again, sex between a man and a woman, Okuso Tana. And then and then according to my informant, Okuku Shirana, he tells me that involving but very physically intense. That's in Isa. Yeah, being involving but very physically intense. On and on and on. Most of the answers, most of the questions didn't have answers. I didn't have ones in many. It said, yeah, sex relation between two men. Yeah. Yes, I found it. Sex relation between two men is this is a Hoko Shirana verb, and many of them are Hoshirana or Shirani, and one is Omoko Shirani. But listen to this. Exists, these ones exist, but surrounded in secrecy since it carries severe punishment. It is abominable. It is an act of Ishifuabi. Ishifuabi. So you can't, you're not here somebody commenting another one in Kanduji market or Kimilili that this is Otherwise, there would be death. You know, somebody would die that day if that happens. My computer just wants to annoy Dr. Walker because it's not moving fast. Any other term? Very quickly, the Luo. Sex is nyamurok. Sex in between a man and woman, nyamurok or nindirok. Nindirok. Ekini dicho gitako. So Sex between man and woman is the same as what I've read. Sexual relation between two men, no want. Sexual relation between two women, no want. A gay man, no want in the law. A gay woman, no want, etc. And then we go to masturbation is poor work. You see? You hear that? Poor work. And then a celibate man is woye ma okonyombo. And a celibate woman, zako ma okonyum. So then Kiswahili, we have shoga. Shoga is a man who goes with other men. Shoga. Well, there are two shoga ones in Kiswahili. One is a woman friend to another. So when a woman calls another one shoga in Mombasa or Malindi, it has nothing with the sex. When somebody, naenda kumona shoga wangu, that means a good friend. But when it's friend to a man, that it means somebody whose sexuality is rather diverse. Kusaga is to sodomize in Kiswahili. Musagaji is a sodomizer. Kusawa is to be sodomized. Kulawiti is to sodomize. Mulawiti is a sodomizer. Kulawitiwa is to be sodomized. Now Arabic, out of the 13 questions that I asked, each one of those has a word. Yes, in Arabic. Each one of those has a word. So then just compare then Arabic society, just compare people in Cairo with the people in Migori. Just compare. Just compare the Bukuzus of Trans Nzoia and the Arabs of Libya, etc., etc., etc. And so then here you are, make inferences about African sexualities. Just make inferences from those few examples. I have limited data because I couldn't have done otherwise. I just have to rely on this very, very small amount of data for me to give you these answers for you to be able to make inferences. Thank you very much for listening to me. I apologize to people from Keroka and Nyamira.
Thank you, Professor Kithaka Wamberia. I think I've taken a few concepts. What is important is I want to invite our panelists. May I begin? Please help me welcome Reverend Godfrey Owino before us. Godfrey Owino will have a few seconds to speak about language, holy text, and sexuality. I'm going to summarize what Professor said, what I'm taking home. Joshua Malizo, please welcome to the stage. Joshua will speak to us about law, sexuality, sexual minority rights in Kenya. Please welcome Ms. Lorna Diaz, the state of sexual and gender minorities in Kenya, challenges and prospects. As I was listening to Professor Mberia, I took a few issues and noted them down. One is the symbiotic relationship between language and culture, very useful. Meza in Kiluya is imesa. We didn't have meza, so because the tool was introduced to Kenya, to Luhyaland, we adopted. Jembe equally is not a part of our life. I am not sure about ugali. Is ugali an African food? I don't know, but Luyas love ugali. I may not be part of those Luyas who love ugali. But two things also that I noted was about linguistic determinism Professor, we share with you the question of determinism. Linguistic determinism is important because it determines, he walks like a dancer. So the language impacts on us in a significant way. But also, Professor mentioned something about linguistic relativism. Some words in this language mean completely different, have completely different meaning in another language. Let me share with you, I'm most competent not in Tharaka, but I'm very competent in Kiluya. But Luya language is a very interesting phenomenon, has an interesting phenomenon. The Bukusu, we also call them Ugandans, and the Maragolis. So when one says my head, he actually means the opposite. So when you say head in Bukusu, the Maragoli thinks about other things. And that is how language works, language relativism and the diversity. The question that I think our panelists, I'm welcoming Kathleen, no, don't say I've forgotten about you. I'm welcoming you to come and moderate this session. I was interested in the dictatorship and tyranny of morality. I want us to think together, should we enforce moral rules? By force, for example. Perhaps, Mr. Malizo, you'll tell us, what is the role of law in moderating morality? When morality, for example, goes haywire, what happens what is your legal perspective? Today we are talking about human rights. In an age of human rights, should we talk about absolute morality and the tyranny of morality? If moral language gives us conditions under which language is transacted, then there are certain concepts that we have already borrowed. What do we do with modernity? Our MC greeted us in a language that I didn't understand. And I can tell you, I can't repeat what she said, but she will repeat it later on. May I kindly, please put your hands together for Professor Mberia as we welcome the panelists. Kathleen Anangwe, please, the stage is yours. I wasn't asking him questions, but we shall have a session where we shall interact with all this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and good afternoon, everyone. It is only now just getting hot and hotter. Thank you, Professor Kithaka, for those inspiring and interesting insights that you had, even though you said you were trying to think about it up to yesterday. He used one of the ethnic groups I may come from. I didn't know any of that you are saying. I said, maybe I haven't asked enough questions, so I'll need to see your write-up later on. But that interest that you bring is a kind of interest I want us to have as we engage the panelists. We shall do it. I realized you know each other, which is not too bad, so I won't introduce you again. But I want us to pick up from where Professor has left off, perhaps just starting out with some questions to help you begin to explore your specific expertise and bring those ideas in, Reverend, and then the legal ones, and then the work of gender and sexual minorities of Kenya, challenges and prospects from Lorna. That would be interesting to hear. I stand here fully aware that we are all of different minds and thoughts, but I want us to think in this free space. That's why the university is very welcoming, because that's what we do here. It's our business to open up spaces for conversation. If you have questions, remember to ask them respectfully. So we know there was a song during my days that will help you calculate how old I am, that sex is natural, sex is good. That's the only sentence in that song that we knew. What they said after that, we didn't know. So we can carry that forward and say sex is natural, sex is good, and sex is for something for many of us, and sex is for nothing for some of us. And I think the skits that were here were very good at helping us see the contradictions. There was one skit here that said, I am a sexual being, but I don't know what I am. So again, you're wondering what is going on here. Then we saw the long skit where the man brings his many wives and women, some of them prospective, and they also don't think he's enough. So is sex enough? Is sexuality enough in terms of our understanding of it? Is it? And sociology says this: the moment you understand your sexuality, you understand your identity, then you can enjoy sex. So again, those relationships we shall look at as we go on. So perhaps the first question I would like to ask is not the one that Professor was asking about the role of language and morality, but is morality born out of nature or convention? Is it who we are or what we find ourselves as in society that we need to be questioning in terms of the moral platform that we need? And perhaps, Reverend Adera, you can begin for us by just telling us, in religion, in religious texts, what is the sex question, and what then is our sexuality according to those texts? Should we even ask the question?
Thank you so much. My name is Adera. I'm a priest, and I'm glad to be here to share my thoughts. And as a priest, I will talk largely from a Christian perspective. I know there are many religions, but I will mention a few things from other religions, but largely I will stick to Christianity because that's where I know best. And I will begin by talking about, as you've asked the question, what is the sex question and what is sexuality within religion? I want to begin by calling the Bible, which is used in Christianity, and the Quran in Islam and other books in other religions. I want to begin by calling it a script from which we derive language that we use to talk about morality in religion and Christianity in particular, a script that we derive questions about sex and sexuality. And so as a script, we come to read with questions. If I don't believe in that script, am I conditioned to do what that script says? For example, if I don't believe in Christianity, if I don't believe in the Bible, am I conditioned to do that which the Bible says? And as a preacher, am I supposed to impose what that script say? Now, to your question quickly, what is the question about sex? And somebody asked me in the morning, what is the fuss about it anyway, that religion keeps talking about it? The question about sex and sexuality in the Bible is not one. First of all, it is a question of where does it come from? And we say it is created by God. And then we ask the next question, for what reason? And we quickly say for procreation, and we stop there. Then we say for who, and we say an adult man and another adult woman, and then we stop there. And so that becomes then what I would call the master script. And anything beyond that is now named differently in the same scripture. Anything beyond that is named sin, is named deviant, something else. But the concept of a script therefore allows us to interrogate, is that only what exists, the master script of the three questions? Is it only that which is there? Or can we ask questions? Or can we find other spaces within that text, within that scripture, that gives us other alternatives? Yeah.
I'll follow up with a quick one. Does the Bible, we'll use the Bible, does the Bible say sex is wrong anywhere?
The Bible does not explicitly say sex is wrong. But there are particular languages that then the Bible uses. There are things like adultery, there are things like fornication and the rest. I'm not even sure if all these terms that we use about adultery, fornication, homosexuality, and all these things exist in the Bible. I'm not able to say each particular verse about them. And so the Bible begins with sex is for procreation, sex is for companionship. It begins with that. And as it builds up to the end of it, there are different languages, different words that are used for different things.
So I think from there we can see that the context does matter.
Exactly.
In the Bible, the context doesn't matter. So when David is looking at Bathsheba in the garden and desires her, kills husband, there's a big moral question, but then is it right or wrong, but takes the child right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's think questions that we shall carry on from what Reverend has told us. But I want to move on to perhaps the legal dimension, and there I will ask the question. There are different types of societies. There are those societies that are accommodative to diverse sexualities. There are those societies that are totally abhorrent of those sexualities and you'll be punished. And there are those that are neutral. Of all those societies, which one would you say reflects our own scenario here in Kenya? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I think those spots are good. Then we can learn.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think that our constitution begins by stating that we are an open and democratic society that is founded on the values of equality, human dignity, and equity. So I believe that this is a constitution that creates a society which is supposed to be open and accommodative. So the long and short of it is that our constitution expects the new Kenya to be accommodative and open to new changes or new people, or to those, even those whom we consider to be outcasts or deviants. And that is why, for instance, we don't get the criminals in the society and burn them down. We appreciate that they have rights, that they are human, and that they must be taken through some particular form of reforms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so you talk about the new Kenya. What if I am of the old Kenya? Assuming of the old Kenya are more, the new Kenya are fewer. Why should I not feel threatened? How can you assure me that I will not lose Kenya altogether by embracing the newness?
When you're born again, you leave the past. Kenya was born again on the 27th of August 2010. So we are supposed to have moved and live our ways of the past.
I was expecting the audience to be clapping to that one. I think the language you've used there just sort of made them think again and take two, and then they got lost. But yes, new Kenya, accommodative, expressive. And I really wish we would have gone another direction and required that if you're a male and you're attending this forum, we should have loved to see you in a skirt and a dress. Then we would know whether they embrace the new Kenya. And I myself would have come in a suit. Wouldn't have made a difference because we have more or less normalized that. But keep thinking about the legal questions, because we have contradictions in law that have come before judges, and the judge is stuck as to whether to abide by the Constitution, which thankfully they do, or to give us what we want to hear, the lynching, the chance to lynch, even when in our secret hearts we don't believe any of that. Thank you, and I'll come back to you. Now to Lorna, just a question to start us off so we can hear your voice. I would want to know, for example, I see you're from the state of sexual and gender minorities in Kenya that you're speaking about, challenges and prospects. Among the Zapotec in south of Mexico, there is the belief of non-binary realities. It's not just male and female. In Kenya, we've also got those in different spaces. I'm really expanding the space and including everyone. But in doing so, in looking at the sexual minorities, why is it that the space within which they can express themselves seems to be constricted by the use of language? Have I made sense in that question?
To some extent.
Yeah, good. Then
I will try to answer it, and if I don't make sense, you'll tell me.
I'll come back.
Before I dive in and cause chaos, that last bit of your question, would you mind going over that again?
All right.
Constricted by the use of language.
Yeah. Perhaps an attempt to moralize it, so that we say we acknowledge the new Kenya, a new Kenya that is very inclusive, but then we want to see certain sexual minorities, women, certain minorities, the women, the Ogiek. But when LGBTQIA++ stand up, we start saying, who are those? Who are they speaking to? Well, who are those? Where is Kenya going? Now we are all going to die.
Get you.
That is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So why would there be a contradiction, yet we are all embracing the newness? Where is the threat?
We have just heard from our eminent speaker about how certain tribes have words. I would have a question for our eminent speaker about the age demographics of the respondents. Because it may be that people from really, really far back, because it was secret, the word abomination was used in your delivery. So what we have is moralizing. Another thing that blew me away was a declaration that society picks who you have sex with. Society dictates who you have sex with. That blows me away. Simply because we are coming to a space of new Kenya where sex is so much more than procreation. So now, sexual minorities, you have a select number of individuals, and look, you will always have a bell curve where you have bigots on one side, you have moderates in the middle, and then you have very far-leaning individuals. Why is this thing humming?
Maybe this is...
Okay, better. So, the wars that we've been seeing around sexuality is not new. When they were writing the Constitution, we had very progressive people come together and say, you know what, these are ours. We can't say Chapter 4, human rights for some. It has to be for all, therefore they need to be accommodated. And they tried. And you had the very firm believers in a particular way saying no and threatening to scuttle that process. Words like conditioning have been used. We are a conditioned society. In everything that has been said, the word conditioning, I hear the word conditioning and I think Pavlov. We hear something, we react. British colonial rule, Queen Regina's, Victoria's morality came straight on a boat. Her morality or her perspective of morality did not just impact people who love different. It impacted women, and it was used as a tool against women. So it's not just about queer folk. What is the word for it? Alphabet family. Is that what people are calling us now? The alphabet family. So when we are interrogating, including the books, one book, my thing is, who wrote the book? What happened to it in between for us to get what we have now? My business is about questioning. How did language become a thing of shaming. We have several up-and-coming people who want to reclaim important language, valuable language, but respectability will dictate that that's vulgar and it's dirty. And sir, I don't mean to come at you. Honestly, no. It's just we're looking at shifts, generational shifts. We're looking at societal shifts. This is a people thing. You will have those from way back when who think in a certain way, who feel in a certain way, and cannot be moved. You have Gen Alphas and Gen Zs that think in a certain way and move in a certain way, and they are moving. Respectability will then be taken, looked at, and either taken on board or discarded. So, constraining environments is not just about language, it's about what those who are using the language of abomination carry in their own entities. My values, my beliefs, the things that make me uncomfortable, the things that embarrass me, the things that I don't want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about private parts. I won't say vagina. I won't say penis. I won't say dick. By the way, even the use of the word dick, prick, for me, those are words that cause me a bit of. But now they're gaining more and more frequency of use. So I would give it a bit of time. The generations will make a difference in just how restrictive the environments are. And you can see that already on TikTok, on Instagram, the internet is entirely likely to change things around.
I think you have more or less opened the Pandora's box by putting that in our faces. Prof was giving very juicy examples, so I was really listening about how in the hospital using those terms makes sense, and outside the hospital you sound a little bit off. In fact, we could say you're poorly socialized. How is this person just talking about their penis like that? But again, the internet allowing us to use those words. Previously, in the 80s, we would not have stood here and even mentioned them. We're not in the school of medicine. So why are these people talking about that? They're immoral. And the quick push towards labeling morality and immorality. Let me move to another area of thought. Individual preferences and group morality. We're all here as members of society. But each of us do have our preferences, dietary, by the same extension, perhaps sexual. How then can individuals rationalize that contradiction? I am me, but I am also we. Reverend, what do you tell your congregants to do? Or Prof, you want to speak to something? Respond, yes. Then Reverend, keep that thought. Do you want to use mine? You can use.
You know, different people, different colors of people in society respond to the question of sexuality in different ways. There are people who somehow, they are not open-minded. The other people who are open-minded, but they know a thing or two. For instance, the question of ideology. I think my aunt in the village would be opposed to gay relations because that is not our way of doing things. The other people who wonder, because as Madam talked about people moving forward, who initiates that forward movement? At what point does it start? Why is it that we only look at certain aspects of sexuality? How come I don't hear anybody talk about polygamy, polyandry? You know, a man with 3 wives in Tharaka, in Bungoma, is seen as a very primitive person. A man who sleeps with another man in Nairobi is seen to be modern. Who decides now what is primitive and what is modern? So, ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss these issues, the question of ideology and who controls that ideology. Is that ideology controlled from Nairobi? Is it controlled from Kampala? Or is it controlled from New York? Is it controlled from Berlin? So whatever we discuss here, do remember, at all times, as we discuss about sexualities, remember to put the question of ideology into the mix. Thank you.
Reverend, who controls your ideology? I think you've got one-word answer for that one. You already told us God, but I won't let you give me one-word answer. Let's talk about the reconciliation first of the reconciliation of individual preference and the group expectation or group morality. What can we do there?
We can begin by asking, why do we even call it preference? Mm-hmm. For example, in regards to issues of sexuality, when we call it preference, for example, and then we begin to assume that there are things somebody chooses to be or somebody chooses to do, they prefer to do that way. What if we ask the question differently and even use the Bible and say that is who God made them to be, such that it's not what they choose to be, but it's who God made them to be? I come from a place where I believe that no human being can consciously choose pain, shame, being hated, being hurt, that no one can just wake up in the morning and choose that. And that's something that chooses them on the way. You don't choose such a battle, it chooses you. And so going back to the Bible and talking about creation, I want to request that as a believer, we don't just read creation from Genesis. And we say, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. We read creation. If Christians like me believe that the Bible interprets the Bible, we read creation elsewhere in the Bible again. And we go to Psalms 139 that says, before I was formed, you knew me, and all my days were not hidden before you. So it doesn't surprise God, for example, that somebody is a particular, orientation or something. And so how then do we reconcile is to begin to ask, why do we even call it preference? Number two, to admit that if we are people who believe in religion, to admit that the devil made no one. Everybody was made by God. Somebody challenged me recently that we claim God for all of us. Why can't we also then claim the devil for all of us? And not just point the devil to one particular direction, that those belongs to the devil. So for me is admit that we are all created and God is not surprised at how he made people. Thank you.
Same question, individual preference reconciled with the group. And when are we going to see individual preference reconciling with the group? Because I think in your legal studies, you do know that group norms will more or less give me direction, the need for social order to avoid disorder. Why do we imagine that minorities are a threat? Why would they bring disorder? They're a minority. So why the pushback? Perhaps New Kenya looks like people, when we say people can do what they want to do, speaking to what Reverend says, that is individual choice. But he says, I am born that way. What can the law do about it progressively? Since it has declared it's progressive. I know I'm asking the really hard ones there. Yeah, it's on.
Thank you. So, on the issue of preference, yes, we should get it from the idea that an individual has inherent dignity or worthiness. The worthiness of a human being entails the idea to make a choice. So then, how then do we draw a balance between the individual joys and the societal idea of choices or morality? The problem comes when we allow the majoritarian views to trample over the individual views because we say that this is what the majority thinks. If we were to allow public opinion or the majoritarian views, then there would be no need for the rights or for the constitution. So where do we get this balance? The balance is obtained when Kenyans gave to themselves a document and they say that this constitution, it will govern us. Then it comes and creates what we call the constitutional morality. There are values that are inbuilt. So if there are societal morality outside there, then the question is, can we reconcile that with the constitution? If that majoritarian or the societal morality cannot, then we allow the concession that was made in the constitution now to take over.
Perhaps to be fair to your background, your expertise, what clauses or one clause would minorities be happy to use to help them know that they are basically included?
Okay, thank you. If you start from the preamble, it says that we are diverse, that we recognize the diversity. Then if you go to Article 10, it speaks of the values such as equality, discrimination, dignity, and human rights themselves as a value. Then if you go to Article 19, it speaks of an open and democratic society. So this now, it forms what people have called the constitutional morality that lays down the values. But in addition, there are rights that apply to all human beings. The Constitution does not say that a minority is not entitled to this right. It says that a human being has a right to dignity. All persons, they have a right to equality. And then if you look at Article 27.4, it tells the states to come up with measures to protect the marginalized and the minority groups. So there is a constitutional obligation on the state itself to alleviate, yes. Oh, that's good.
So what I'm hearing from you is the language of legitimacy. Okay, great. So I know we're in the right place at the right time. Lorna, bring it home to us by speaking to your expertise. What is the state of sexual and gender minorities? What is their state? And the second question to that is, what language then should we use?
The state. You can hear me? The state of sexual and gender minorities. I'll be honest, it has never been safe. It has never been good. We have recorded instances of violence for as long as I have worked at CalPlus. What has happened is that the intensity of the violence has shifted. Sometimes it has gone down. And then most recently, it shot. It must be me. Most recently, it shot through the roof. There actually was a timeline. And so It's not as though I would be inventing information. As of August 2022, things shifted dramatically. In 2022, we saw violence, and that was, we were recording cases of 1,100 cases. In 2023, that blew up completely. Why? Is because for every month except 2, there were repeated and relentless inciting activities that were being moved and promoted by those who believe that their way is right. And the roadside declarations, the protests, these were alarming to no end, because take, for example, the protests in Mombasa in March. When you have children being given the mic and being cheered on, okay, this may be trigger warnings for someone, and I shall apologize for trigger warnings, but my life is an entire trigger warning, so hey. When a child is given the mic, put on a podium, and utters the words, Chinjahawa, Uahawa, Chinjahawa, repeatedly, and the crowd is being whipped up. And no one holds anyone to account for it. The adults in the space, all the way from February 2023, when the Supreme Court gave its ruling. By the way, how much time do you have?
2 minutes.
I've got stories for days. Okay. So we saw individuals, we witnessed this relentless and they conflate things. They bring things together to make their narrative palatable. So they bring in abortion. And to that, they tag sex work. And to that, they'll tag sexual minorities. And to that, they'll tag family values. And so they conflate a thing. And what we see is that Kenya is in such a battle state. Our lives are similar to the lives of people in today's Kenya that you dread reading X, you dread reading the newspaper, you dread hearing Situation Room, you dread because you are waiting to hear what new thing is coming for your pocket. Ours, it was what new thing is coming for our lives. And there's a difference. And that hasn't ended. So only 2 out of 12 months in 2023, we actually slept like with one eye open. But all the other months, we were chronically awake, chronically vigilant. State of the community, I'll say this. At the end of the day, I take my hat off to the LGBTQ+, and about language, I think we need to find our own language. The LGBTQ+. The whole LGBTQ, no. We can. There are words, there is language. But the resilience.
Let me take that bit
a language that reflects Kenyanness, who we are, who the community is. And it is a community. And we do, when people come out or when people are outed, we come and support. We come together. We did that for COVID. We have done that through all the insecurities. And so we try to take care of each other because nobody else will. Everyone else is afraid of the current environment. So it's not just us, the people, it's everyone that we interact with. Our families go through enough trauma. So you might have one parent that's okay, but the other one isn't. And then you have the relatives, and then you have the neighbors, and then you have the landlord, and then you have the teachers, and you have... So from individual through to macro level, at all those stages, you will find significant challenges at all steps across the board. And the only reason I prefer the ecological systems theory is because it allows us to see what kind of human problem we're dealing with. So it's not pretty, but we're resilient. We're going nowhere.
And the hierarchy, I think you've just painted a hierarchy that is quite controversial, but I want to pick your positive end there, in terms of a positive language, that we can create our own language that is accommodative, which reflects on reverence, and the new Kenya that we now know, which is also accommodative and acceptive. That is a linguistic word that talks about acceptance. I want to open to the floor, at least take five questions to my panelists here, very eminent, as you can have heard. Those were just questions, those were just statements they were making to help us know who they are, what their expertise is, and why they're here in this very open space where we want to engage them. So you can now ask some questions that we can hear responses to, hoping to elucidate further this question of the language of morality, morality of language. Lorna has ended it up perfectly by saying the language we use should be one that we have created ourselves, that is not out there, or that we're not ascribing to ourselves, and a language that is accommodative, acceptive, and it resonates with the law as well as with the religious. I don't want to use the church only because there are also other religions that I'll be speaking for. So any questions from plenary? Will I start from the left, moving to the right? Do you want to run that session? Run across, okay. They only have one. That's one. And also to acknowledge an online community that is listening in. Questions coordinator, who is receiving the questions from online, the person can keep giving them to me as we go along. So question one, gentleman in white. Make them short and clear. This is not a podium for you to now provide your gospel according to. It is the question.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Elias. I'm a student here. So, Dr. Anangwa, you have asked a very good question to Mr. Joshua. Why is it that minority bring disorder in the society? Because in sociology, you know very well, in every orderly society, there is some disorder. And in every disorderly society, there is some order, and vice versa. In every disorderly society, there is some order. Now, is it that Kenya is in which category? Is it in an orderly society where there is some disorder, or is it in a disorderly society where we need some orders? Thank you.
I'll take three and then you come in. And that was directed at Joshua. Okay, Joshua,
any
that's
other
for you.
question?
Another one. Let me take three.
Okay, there is one here.
There was a gentleman on this side as well.
Okay, fine, I'll come to
Yes.
them.
Hello, my name is Grace Kamau from Grassroots Collective Voices. My question goes to the priest. In the biblical context, now that we are having this generation, the Gen Zs and the Gen Alpha, how would you contextualize the LGBT community, yet it is not morally or socially accepted in the realm of religion? Now that we are having these, we are being civilized and the times are changing. Will the Bible change and one day, someday, it integrates the LGBT community?
Okay, again, the Bible there.
Rev, you got that?
You got that?
You got that? Good.
Yeah, when you hear Gen Z, I think everybody now gets it, especially if the Reverend himself is Gen Z. Getting it completely. And then we'll just take one last one from here before then another round.
A lot of questions to the Reverend here today. So my question also goes to the Reverend. And this is in relation to Scripture. So does Scripture apply to everybody, or is it just to people who believe in what Scripture says? And I will take my reference from the Pauline epistles. So for example, the beginning of Corinthians says, from Paul, who was called by the will of God, to the church of God which is in Corinth. Why does he write specifically to the church in Corinth and not to everybody who was in Corinth, when we know that other people in Corinth? So when we talk about sexualities and scriptures, so when the church says we should not allow this because the church does not allow, is it only for the believers who have chosen to believe in the gospel of Christianity, or even atheists and people who believe in Jehovah, like myself? Does Scripture also apply to us, or we can exclude ourselves from the teachings of the church?
And you know, I am laughing at that one because then we know some people leave the church because they say that, and that's not what I want to be talking about. Let me give you my mic to respond.
All right, and thank you. So there was the question, do we then need to change the Bible? And of course the question around contextualization. Now, let me give another example apart from sexuality issues. For a long time, we have always believed that the Bible says women should be quiet in church. Today we have women bishops, we have women who lead churches. For a very long time, of course, we've said, the Bible says, do not do intercropping, don't plant two crops in the same farm. Science has said that is best practice. Or for example, like crossbreeding, which in some codes in Leviticus, the Bible says don't do that. And science has proved today that is good practice. The Bible says do not wear a cloth that is made of tulip. I am wondering who doesn't have one now. So what has happened over time is not that the Bible has changed, is what he has asked. People have asked questions of context. When was this written? To whom was it written? And what was happening at that time that informed what was written? The question of ideology. There were ideologies of the time, there were philosophies of the time that then informed particular writings, and over time, that has been interpreted to come to a place where we do particular things, yet we know the Bible says something else which is different. That is the window that I invite people to begin to look at the Bible. We don't need to change anything. We need to apply the Bible like we have done before. It said women should not speak. Today, we have women bishops. It is a journey that we need to go and say there are other things that we can also begin to affirm and accept as we move forward. Secondly, the question about is the Bible applied to everybody? For example, says, I write to the church in Corinth. And recently, for some of us who like memes, there was a meme in my vernacular that asked, it's hard to translate, but it asked, what has a letter written to the Corinthians to do with Jokano? You know, people born in Kisumu. And people laughed, but for me as somebody who is studying theology, it was a very critical question. And I said to myself, and I explained this to different people, the moment we decided to become Christians, or the moment we accepted to be evangelized and becomes Christians, one fundamental thing about our faith that we cannot challenge is the Bible. And so we said what is written in the Bible is God's word meant for all of us, and we can apply it in our context. And so I began by saying, as a script, I am not supposed to use the Bible to condition somebody who does not, for example, to go to a Muslim. And I respect all religions. I'm a Christian, but I respect all religions. I am not supposed to force a Muslim to become a Christian, or I'm not supposed to force someone else to become something else using the Bible. The software of the Bible is love. The software of the Bible is equality, it's justice. And I want to talk about that and welcome everybody to that space of love and justice. Thank you.
There was a Gen Z question, Gen Z, Gen Alpha question. Did you get that one?
Yes, and of course I answered it by saying interpretation of the Bible as we keep moving on and we meet different contexts, we meet different questions. Actually, when we talk about even Gen Z today, they are asking questions that have been asked over time, but in different ways, based on their context. And so it's about people who use the Bible, preachers, to be, can I use the word woke? To know their context, to know the questions being asked, and provide answers based on that context.
Thank you. We are a woke community, and you have mentioned very welcoming. 3 more questions.
There's a question to him.
Oh, there was. Sorry.
Yes.
The legal. Please.
Yes, there is a question from Elias who asked why the minority bring disorder. And this question is closely tied to at the point that homosexuality is an African, so like it's something foreign that is being brought in. But if we accept that sexuality is humanity, then we will be lying to ourselves to say that it can be tied to geographical points. If we agree to that, then it will mean that before the Europeans came to Africa, there were no people in Africa. That's one. 2, is it true that they bring this disorder? No. It is the majority who do not want to accommodate other people in the society. So it is the majority of human people that want to tell people, you remain silent and deny yourself of your own sexuality. This is not true, because even in pre-colonial Africa, homosexuals existed. Prof. Sylvia Tamale does a very good historical analysis in this, like on this. For example, the Baganda, the Iteso. The only thing that happened is that there was some form of cleansing because they believed that there were spirits who were affecting, but they did not deny that they were existing. So the disorder, if any, is brought by the majority and not by the minority.
Perception of disorder. Yes. Yeah, perception of disorder. Let me not keep it up here. I had a question for Lorna. Questions from plenary? Yes.
Thank you so much. It's on? Okay. So, I think one of the things that we need, and I'm asking from the last, my name is Roland Ebole. I'm a researcher at Amnesty International. I cover East Africa. So, one, I do not think the majority bring the disorder, because within the majority there are people who truly understand, these aspects. Within the majority, there's also a minority that, is loud and does not want a few to express themselves. Going back into, Christianity and all that, we have seen a lot of changes, even as, the priest says that, the North has always been the Bible. We have seen changes. We've seen situations where the Catholic has got more books. Others do not have those books because they have been removed for various reasons, including reasons to do with how people express themselves then and how it was recorded. we have seen the Bible change so much that language has changed. In language, we have got Gen Z Bible. For those who can go online, you can find Bible that addresses, the current person. I'm seeing in this forum people calling each other Mr. I do not know what. In the new generation, you'd actually be very sensitive before you actually call somebody, because people have what they prefer to be addressed. Some people would want to be called they. Some people would add to, my pronouns would be him, he. And we are seeing a lot of changes. So how do we address that maybe in the current African, society, in terms of expression, in terms of how we want to relate with each other? How do we also look at the question of, thinking around sexuality and not looking at it as, a minority or, a majority issue. So I'm just thinking in terms of how do we go from here in terms of laws of morality. We are seeing, somebody has mentioned that, to attack, let me call the alphabet community, the LGBTI community, state has always come with family value laws. They've always tied it, and I think that is actually to whip to the emotions of the society, in terms of, tied with anti-abortion, tied with, laws around, sexual, offenses, and in Uganda, for instance, where there is a very, very dangerous anti-homosexuality act, what was used to really arouse people's anger into accepting the law was saying how homosexuals have gone after children, So how do we now start speaking against these things? Because at the end of the day, it is about how society appreciates the expression of these people who are adult having consent for their own sexual expression and relationships. Thank you.
And I like where you're taking us with that discussion, especially when you bring in the idea of all of us here are actually expressing our sexuality in the colors we chose to wear today, in the outfits we're wearing, because it's really a question of emotions, expression, experience, and not so much labeling and assuming or using assumptions to move forward, to start saying that these are better than the other. The Ugandan Act, where they talk about homosexuals going after children, and the pushback saying, look, if you gave us the list, that is not what the data would show. In fact, the data would show otherwise. So always wanting to know and always seeking data is perhaps going to work against what Lorna was presenting there, the violence that you met out so well without knowing the substance of it, or with disregard for the context, simply because you can lynch and therefore you go and do it. Any other questions from plenary? Yes, Professor Nyabul there.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Oh, somebody has a mic somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then Nyabul after.
My name is Anthony. And my question is very closely tied to the question that has been asked previously. And I'm going to direct my question to Joshua, because the supreme law of the land provide very discrete provisions on the principles of equality and non-discrimination, as you mentioned, from actually the preamble all the way from Article 1, you mentioned Article 19, Article 27.4 on non-discrimination and fair treatment of all the people. Now, the court have actually pronounced themselves on this subject on various court cases. So my concern or my question would be, what then, might you be aware of any interventions that have been instituted either by the civil society or religious institutions to challenge these negative stereotypes and narratives that actually propagate hate towards the LGBTQ community? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether it's a concern, but I see the debate zeroing down to LGTB. I can't pronounce it. The conversation is zeroing down to that. Maybe naturally, that's the nature of discourse. My concern is about our sexual orientation. How is it determined by human anatomy? Just thinking aloud. Or situations. When I speak about situations, I mean places like prisons as a breeding ground for some kind of orientation, and other such secluded places like boarding schools, our boarding schools, or closed communities, which are not co-educational, let me say. They are confined places for only one kind of people, let me say that. Maybe males or maybe females or any other gender for that matter. How does that influence our sexuality or sexual orientation? Correct me where I'm wrong. And the first one, about anatomy. I listen to a popular pastor, Dalan Ruki. I don't shy away from calling his name. He preaches well on television, one of our local radio stations. And he's not shy. He's on YouTube. You can Google that. And he's open and says that he has both organs. And he has managed to produce children, both as male and as female. Yet she or he has not decided to change, to be something else. He is a married man. He is a father of his children. So why the hula baloo? Sometimes you have no choice. If you are born this way, maybe by the sixth finger, that is what you are. So are we made differently, or do we choose to be different? Thank you.
I won't take more first, just hold on. To Professor's question, Lorna, if you'll take that one. And then the other question by Anthony, I think that goes to Joshua, the one about the clauses. Osaji, if you have one, I will allow it so that we can do it all at once.
Pastor and Reverend, I have a question for you. My name is Osaji. I teach here, Center for Human Rights, and also in literature. I'm looking at the appraisal you gave God, the God who is very rigid in the Bible, both in the Old and the New. But you've given him a progressive reading. I'm just wondering whether that sits well with your colleagues, especially in the Pentecostal movement. And I'm also a Catholic, so I listen to Catholic priests and even the Pope on this matter. Your reading of God appears to be different from what I listen to the clergy. So I'm just wondering whether you are part of the progressive movement or you are actually giving us the real gospel. Thank you.
I'm laughing there because Reverend did say clearly, his is a God of love. So I don't know if the Pope was saying a different thing or the Pentecostals are saying a different one, but that's interesting. I'll give the expert. Let me give you this mic and then you give me the other one. So let him start and then Lorna, you
I will respond to your question in a minute, but also want to add to something that has come from the floor. The struggle about LGBT and the language of minority. Then I come to your question. in my considered opinion, that is language that has traveled. It has come from somewhere and it has come to us. The fact that professors struggle to find names for particular orientations in our vernaculars and didn't find it does not say it doesn't exist. What we've had is a language that has been given to us for organizing, and like Clona says, we need to have other languages. I suggest to us the works of Professor Zetu Matebeni, who has found over 600 languages in Africa that refers to diverse sexualities that we could begin the conversation with. Secondly, on to the question about minority, I also want to bring into the discussion deliberate aspect of minoritization, that people are assigned to be in that minority so that then we can justify our claims to convert them, our claims to make them be like us. To the question of Dr. Osogi, my reading of God, and does it sit well with my other colleagues in Pentecostal spaces? I am not Pentecostal myself, but I have nothing against Pentecostals. Some of them are my friends. And am I talking about a real gospel or fabricated gospel? Two quick things. Number one, progressive reading of God as you have called it. God has revealed God's self in ways that God wants to reveal God's self. And as a Catholic, you would say the revelation of God is progressive. And as Protestant and Pentecostals, I will say that Jesus Christ is the final, perfect revelation of God, which is true. And so I would go to that man, that person, Jesus, and look at the way he lived when he was here on earth, and the people he chose to identify with, and the places he went to, and the things that he did. And I would say, I want to be like Jesus, progressive in my thought, identifying with people that the systems of the time, religious and legal systems, have minoritized, identifying with them to bring them into the place where all of us are children of God. And so that is the real gospel for me. If I'm a Christian, I want to talk about Jesus. I want to talk about Jesus who is progressive and identifies with people. And just like Prof talked about Apostle Dalan Ruki, I also invite us to listen to him because he brings a different theological anthropology that is unique, that can also help us do a conversation. What Dalan Ruki does, for example, while we have said and that it's cast on stone that there's only male and female, or man and woman, his theological anthropology opens that space and says, God created me like I am, through his songs. And that should also help us as we look for language. Because Dalan Ruki, for me, as you said, is one person that gives us language that we can begin to conceive and talk about diversity in our spaces. Thank you.
Yes, to Anthony, who has asked that, yes, although the Constitution is very progressive and protects all people, if you look at the penal code, it creates an offense for a person who engages against the order of nature. The problem is that the police and some people have interpreted the position to mean that it criminalizes a person from being a homosexual. But the truth is that the provision does not. It only criminalizes the act. So are there any interventions from the CSOs? Yes. Currently, we are at the Court of Appeal. We are challenging the constitutionality of that particular provision. And two, we are also trying to create awareness on the discrimination and the rights of the minorities. And thirdly, we also participated at the African Commission, and this has led to the adoption of Resolution 275, which binds on the Kenyan government to ensure that it prevents, and if it fails to prevent, then it investigates and it prosecutes all forms of violence against members of the sexual minorities.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I hope those who are taking notes are taking notes. Lorna, on Professor's question of anatomy and orientation in those spaces where you have, which may propagate that kind of behavior, to use his words or to paraphrase them as expression. What would your comment be?
So, Prof, around forced confinement, prison settings, I ran a program prison that was looking at instances of men who have sex with men in prison settings. The thing about that is, and that you can also interlink with the school settings that you mentioned as well. Why? Is because these are human beings, and humans need connection. They need to connect to each other. In schools, we're putting these humans, these young humans together at a time when they're going through sexual experimentation. They're going to experiment. What happens is, and this now ties with the prison setting, is once they come out, if you are cis heterosexual, I'll keep it simple, if you are heterosexual, you are heterosexual. You come out of that setting, you go to the desire that works for you. If you are homosexual, that's where you will veer towards. But the forced setting brings you together with other human beings, so they happen to be of the same sex, the same gender. You need connections, you will find those connections. And that is just human nature. So the fear of children experimenting, and it's when you stop people from getting information, from understanding, from knowing a thing, then they will know what they don't want. But by simply blanket stating and moralizing in a relatively complex way, you find individuals now curious and wanting to take a look and wanting to try what this thing is that everyone's yelling and screaming about. So to answer your question, those forced confinement settings, it's not, if your orientation is heterosexual, that's what it is. Of course, now we can start talking about a spectrum where, and we have mentioned this repeatedly, where you have sort of like the bell, where you have extremes on either side and a whole lot of middle ground. So studies that were done many years ago and have still held somewhat true is that sexuality is somewhat fluid, especially for the middle ground. It is more fixed on the outer edges. So you are either very heterosexual or you are very homosexual, and no room to play in between. The in-betweeners. I hope the folks of that show don't come for me. Please don't come at me for that. But the ones in between the extremes, moments will occur. Moments will occur where, one, they question. Number two, perhaps it was a moment, and it doesn't mean that it's fixed. It's seeing what's out there. Curiosity is human, and understanding the world and understanding the entity in the world is so human. So when we pull that away, not only do we dehumanize, which is where all the harm comes from, and the language and the the marginalized, that whole beautiful thing that you said. But it also dehumanizes the ones doing it, because they become more and more violent and harm. The harm that they prescribe is heinous to the extent that sometimes you cannot fathom that another human being would wish this kind of thing on anybody. So rest assured, prison settings don't homosexuals make. And neither do schools. You are or you're not. Or you're in between and you enjoy sex.
Thank you, Lorna. And I think when we started out, we said all of us enjoyed. That's why we're here. Our parents enjoyed it as well. That's why we're here, etc., etc. I've got an online group asking questions. You can go ahead. The panelists will listen.
Questions, one from Duko and another one from Zomokule. And Nduko is asking, what do the speakers, the panelists, think about the origins, agenda, and objectives of labels of shame, come taboo, come vulgarity, and that, in respect to human sexual body parts, identity, expressions, etc., and how the same labels vanish in commercial advertising and militarism? I'm not so sure if that is clear before I ask the second question.
Okay.
That's clear? Good. From Zamokule, they're writing from the University of Cape Town, and I think it's a comment. Okay, the first comment is, I must say this is a beautiful conversation. Now to the question, I'm passionate about the idea of moving away from the LGBT acronym, biomedical, religious, and human rights frameworks of human identification. Thinking from an Afrocentric perspective, I want to ask how indigenous knowledges can be leveraged to promote the acceptance of sexual diversity and promote language for us as Africans to identify ourselves, defining ourselves on our own terms, in brackets. That is, if we even need language to categorize our sexual and romantic experiences. And definitely, people are following the great conversations here.
This is a bus.
Excellent questions. I don't envy sitting
Yeah.
there. I'm glad I'm not the one that's there.
I'm wondering why it's been passed to me, but it's fine. Let me begin about the language of shame and taboo and its origins. But I'll begin by sharing a story from where I come from. Where I was born, having sex is called sleeping with each other. And children are socialized to believe that sex is only done when people sleep with each other. Recent cases, and this you can find, many school-going girls have been raped while standing, while sitting on motorbikes, and they do not know they are raped because no one slept with them. And so the aspect of language and even the use of euphemisms to talk about sex, body parts in itself is dangerous. It doesn't empower, and it doesn't allow room for questioning and talking. And the origins of it for me is what I think, I don't know who said it, the interruption that we had when missionaries and guests outside Africa came. In fact, as a Christian, I know too well that missionaries did not understand what they saw. Celebration of sexuality and bodies, that the way they were presented, they did not understand. And so, using what Lorna said, their own sensibilities that were Victorian, they called it deviant, they called it evil, they called it sinful. And so for me, that's the origin. And we need to go back there and challenge that interruption and find language to move forward. Indigenous knowledge that the second speaker talked about. And they are there. I am asking all of us not to be lazy, to accept what we've been given, but to go research, go find out, because they exist. My final comment with those two questions about the acronym LGBTIQ+. My challenge is that the letters are not just letters of the alphabet. They're not alphabet community. Behind those letters are real people. Black girls, black boys, black trans people, and they're real human beings. And so I invite us to continue the movement of throwing the letters away and talk about real people, real issues, real concerns. It may take us time to find a name that is birthed from indigenous knowledge, but the way to begin is to admit they are not letters, they're human beings. Thank you.
I like that emphatic end. They're just not letters, and it makes us reflect what have we been saying, even when we want to other them, to use sociological terms. Yes, Joshua.
I think that this is the first time that I'm seeing a pastor agreeing that this that these are Victorian. Yeah. So I completely agree with him, and I will just add that it has a one name. It is a colonial legacy that we didn't have it. It is just foreign to us. So yes, we can use our own in just means of dealing with it. Yes. So thank you so much. Yeah,
that Sunday we are there, but my clergy shouldn't hear me say that. Yes, Lorna?
I could not do one better, so I won't. I will go in a direction of what's coming. Because if we thought colonialism was dead or ended, no, far from it. There's a different version of it. And when I say colonialism, what I'm basically looking at is dominion, control, suppression, and we are seeing that, a reactivation of that. And it's pulling on heartstrings, it's pulling on values, it's pulling on the things you believe in, that you hold strong, and you say, I'm a good person. Yes, you are. But the language that's being used now is spiritual colonization. I don't even want to call it spiritual, because spirituality and religion are separate things. For me, it's about interrogating everything you hear and everything someone tells you that makes you think to yourself, really? Your intuition should guide you. The misinformation and disinformation, and we're still talking language, the misinformation and disinformation is extensive, and it's not just about sex and how you love different. It's across the board. Sifting through that information can hurt the head, but it is necessary work. And you said, let's not be lazy. Let us question when someone asks us something and asks us to think in a particular way and to feel in a particular way. I think we need to ask questions. Just the same questions that you asked. Who is it for? Who does it benefit? Those lovely questions as well.
Food for thought, lots of it. I want to close, unless there's somebody in the, I was about to say congregation, in the audience. I am colonized on this side. In the audience, anybody with a question that they could not leave here without asking, because Prof. Mbongi, you come last. Let me give the gentleman in the hat, then Prof. Somebody in the dark somewhere? Okay, that's it. Okay, let's begin with the hat. Today is the only moment, I think they say that in marriage. Forever hold your peace. After this, we'll just be saying noise. But this is it. So gentleman in the hat, then Prof. Mbongi, and then I'll come to the other hat right here. Okay.
My name is Ngare. The question I have, it's around two words, fornication and adultery. Those words are sins in the Bible. And if you look at the people who participate in those two sins, they talk about desire, sexual desire, that they choose to act on. Very similar to what people who engage in same-sex activity and behavior say. You know, there's desire, you act on that desire, but then there's something about either religion or the Bible that forbids that particular acting on that desire. And yet, over time, as far as I know, fornication, which I think is sex between people who are not married, is not illegal, at least in many countries in the world. The people, young people, university students right now who are not married, engaging in it, they're not walking around afraid that they're going to be arrested, afraid that they're going to be lynched. That used to happen, but things have happened over time. The same goes for adultery, which is sex outside of marriage, or sex with someone you're not married to, but maybe you're married or both of you are married to different people. Now, the two sins, even though a lot has happened over time, right now, they're not illegal in many countries. I still say many countries because some Islamic countries have it. And yet, they still remain sins in the Bible, and in many conservative interpretations of the Bible, they still remain sins. But yet we seem to be very clear about the distinction about private belief and religious belief about these two sins and how you relate to the same people in the streets. Why is that? Why can that not translate to the conversations you're having around right now?
So let me just.
Thank you. I'm Lucy Gishane. I expected a lot of questions from ladies or female women because from the presentations before it began, we're talking about women, beauty, and all these things. And so I expected a lot of questions, but my questions go to our legal experts. So, in an inclusive society of equality, of equity, what is sexual deviance? What is morality? And is there something like legal morality? And in regards to human rights, are there rights, provisions, or freedoms for individual sexual identity or social identity and practice? And on morality of language, what do we mean by minority? Does it imply sexual orientations or diversity? And is the term itself not discriminating? And how minor or major is it presently and looking into the future in the Kenyan society? Seeing that at Professor Wamberia's example, the practices were present even in our traditional cultures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Those are 10 questions right there. And sometimes...
learned friend, you are able to get that?
Yes. That list, okay.
I take one last one and then...
And then Professor here, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Barbara from Oram. I have a question to the legal expert and the church, if I may use that word. My question is, you have talked about the state of the criminalization of the same-sex agenda in Kenya. My question is, what is the state of things? Are we moving towards decriminalization, as in Angola and Mozambique? Or how is the state of things? Are we moving towards decriminalization or making it as harsh as the state is in Uganda? And then my other question is for the church. Again, you have a lot of influence on matters, sexual minority, and things of the sort. So my question is, you have talked about your gospel being the gospel of love. And I just want to know how much of that acceptance is being dispensed by the church in as far as moving towards progressing a progressive society in inclusion and equality among all sexual minorities. How much is the church willing to be tolerant and accepting to these minority groups, and what influence or what role do you play in helping the society be accepting of these minority groups? Thank you.
Okay, I think we allow the panelists to respond, or we just take all the questions?
Take all the questions. I think Prof here. As the mic moves to Professor Mbongi, and I'm giving him advantage, he's from the Department of History, he's the chair. I'm sure he has something to say about African sexuality, which is the hyper theme of this, this session here. Prof is right behind there, the tall guy with his hand up. While the mic is moving, I'll just respond to the lady who said females are not asking questions like she hoped in this session. I would say it's because females understand sexuality quite a bit. So, you know, we don't have any, and there's no dark matter. You know, we know it, we express it, we show it, and we enjoy it. So that's really what it is. Yes, Prof, go ahead.
Okay. Dr. Nangwe, that is subject to debate. Probably we will do it in another day. My name is Kenneth Mbungi. I'm from the Department of History and Archaeology. I have just two quick comments and a small question. And forgive me, because I had stepped out to attend to some official business. I left Professor Gitaka Wamberia presenting towards the end of his presentation. So if I will repeat what has already been said, please forgive me. One, I don't know whether I'm the only one, but I come from a background where matters of sexuality are not talked about openly. I was born, bred, and basically educated in a village setting, just half a kilometer from my mother's kitchen, from kindergarten to Form 6. It's only that there was no University of Nairobi there, otherwise I could have ended up there. Now, I consider today's meeting very relevant because it begins to kill the silences that surround matters of sexuality, especially for those of us who have refused to grow beyond the village. And there are many, even here in town. Sexuality is talked about through metaphors, where I originate from. You are either doer, or you are done, or you are eaten, you know, that kind of language. But I'm glad that we are going beyond the language of eating and being eaten, done and doing as we talk. And I think that is the most successful part of this meeting, and I'm glad there's a bishop here. There's a lady who asked a question I wanted to ask about the readiness of the church. I come from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm an elder. And I'm glad that you are here talking about this. And I'm supporting that. I hope my pastor is not watching and listening to this. Number two, Lorna, you talked about the reality of colonialism in our lives and time now. That's real, and I know that as a historian. But more relevant to us is actually the knowledge systems that we operate in the continent that are still overly colonial, our systems of knowing. Look at me here. I'm standing here, an African, talking to predominantly fellow African in a language that is neither mine or yours. Well, so the Victorian values which
we still cling to as the so-called Anglophile. The British moved away a long time with the introduction of the miniskirt, So neocolonialism is a reality, particularly in matters sexuality in our time. And finally, and I don't know, I probably expected that Professor Gitaka Wamberia talked about this. The language of sexual diversity in our indigenous settings. Dr. Waka and I, the other day, I don't know whether Waka is still here, we used about 4 hours in an evening in the senior common room talking about this. We almost fought, actually, about this. So I just wanted to know from any of the panelists, do we have descriptions of, sexual diversity in our different languages? It is something that I'm interested in as a historian. I've gone back to a few communities. Whereas I find concepts talking about heterosexuality, I hardly find concepts talking about homosexuality or any other sexual orientation. It's a whole PhD project, Dr. Waka, which we might think of. But if you have experiences more than us, please, I will be more than glad for you to share so that we stop this fight between me and Waka and other colleagues from other departments. Thank you very much.
Now that there has been mention of females not commenting, I could take one for the team. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret. I am a human rights lawyer, and my bias is health. I'm also a Catholic, and as a participant in the second session of this series of colloquiums that we've had with the University of Nairobi, I'd like just to invite the participants today to maybe look for the book or maybe a summary on Google. So there's a book by Dan Brown called The Origin. And now that today we are speaking about language, and I had another question by a gentleman in the room, and the gentleman said that there's a desire, and then when you act upon the desire, then that's the onset of sin, and then at that point is where, when there's a consequence, the law comes in. So in that book, we have a depiction of the same scenario. So there's a monarch in that book from Spain. Spain was predominantly Catholic as well. So a monarch from Spain and a bishop, a Catholic bishop, they were in a relationship, but a relationship that was not acted upon, right? So the act, like what our legal expert on the panel said, is what is criminalized in Kenya. But the state of being, the personhood, I invite everyone here, anyone who reads, you can look for the book, or anybody who would like to find a summary. The book is The Origin. It's by Dan Brown. Thank you. It's fiction. Yeah, but depicts so much of what happens. Yeah.
Last. Yeah. Okay, so I have two questions, but one, since you are recommending books, Prof, you asked for books, so I can recommend Boy Wives and Female Husbands on the topic you are talking about. So it talks about it, and also what Reverend mentioned, Zethu Matebeni, she's done a lot of work on that, and also Stella Nyanzi, the fiery professor from Uganda. So she talks a lot about these things, and there's a wealth of evidence about it. My second question goes to Lorna, and when we talked about matters of colonialism, so I was wondering, is it colonialism or it is just co-opting of language from America? Because at the power and influence that America has, so we co-opt their language and think they're forcing it on us. Because even things like the word gay, until 1970, it used to mean happy. So even in America, gay started meaning homosexuality in 1970. This is like 40 years ago. The word homosexual first appeared in 1868. So they are very recent things. So language has been evolving. So what happens is that the way we look at sexualities has been politicized in America, and then now we take that politicization of the language in America and bring it to Kenya. So is it colonialism, or it's co-opting of the political battles in America that then we think are ours, when this language, the arguments, everything is what the West does? Lastly, this is not a question but a comment to the earlier question on settings and what have you. So I will use two examples just quickly to clarify what Lorna said. Homosexuality is a thing that somebody is. It's not something that you learn or you become. If it was something that somebody becomes, I would point you to the case of Brazil, which legalized homosexuality in 1830, 200 years ago. If people were learning to be homosexual by now, the whole of Brazil will be homosexual. But then it's only less than 5% that identify as LGBTQ. South Africa was like the third country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage in 2006. This is 20 years later. How many gay South Africans do you know of? Less than 2% of the population. So it is not Homer that you will see a gay person and be infected because the next neighbor is. So it's a thing that some people are and some people are not. And majority are not. So it's like at most 10% of any population, and that is even a stretch. So we don't need to start losing sleep over it. So people cannot learn to be homosexual. Thank you.
Very quickly, please.
Hello. I have a question. It's on the question of inclusivity. My question is, if we are going to be very liberal and inclusive about this question of sexuality, to what extent are we going, as a people and a society, are we seeing ourselves one day including bestiality and pedophilia in that same bracket? That's just my question. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nelson Monyo. I have a question on sexuality. It goes, as we are familiar with, we've been socialized as moral beings since we were children, and then we are Christians, most of us. So there are these texts in the Bible where, like, when you go back to Sodom and Gomorrah, what they did or what they involved themselves in. Okay, so the question is, should we disregard any form of punishment that will come or might come from us encouraging or being okay with these new trends that have come, or should we learn from the history because it repeats itself?
I could just say something. You see, new trends that have just come, that is where we have a problem. It is not new trends.
I want you to come and sit in front here, then you will undo what you just said about the new trend, but that's your question, so we'll allow the panelists to answer. Do you want to just breathe in and out and then take it? Because I think my job is done here.
Yeah,
so good questions all round. I think we can educate ourselves. Prof. Bongi, thank you for that insight as well.
Yeah, very good questions, and I have very quick answers. And inviting anyone who wants to have a conversation over lunch, we can talk. Number one is the issue of pedophilia and bestiality. One thing, as far as I'm concerned, one thing that we all agree, people who identify as homosexuals and those who don't, we agree that pedophilia is a crime. That we agree. So that then when you find a gay person engaging in sex with a minor, that is not homosexuality, that is pedophilia. And that needs to be taken for what it is. And we can have more conversations about that later. Secondly, about the issue of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, if you believe in the Bible, you know that there are 4 different texts about Sodom and Gomorrah, not only Genesis. And all these texts say lots of things. And one of them is what Ezekiel says, that this then was the sin of your brother, Sodom and Gomorrah. And they say it is their inhospitality, treating strangers badly, not giving food to poor people. And I want us to talk about that more, because people only read one instance in Genesis and conclude that that's all the Bible says about Sodom and Gomorrah. And even in the book of Genesis, that particular context, I would want to ask the person, do you see any act of somebody having sex with another person, like a homosexual act in that text? It is not there. But we can have that conversation. Why was Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed? Other texts in the Bible, including Jesus in Matthew, agree it was the issue of inhospitality. It's not a new trend. The fact that Sodom and Gomorrah exist in other places, we have been made to believe it's new trend. It's not new trend, and I think we can talk more about that. The question from Barbara about what is the church doing, and what am I doing, if I got you right, and of course, tying it up to Professor Obogi's question. Number one, first of all, Prof, I am not a bishop. I can be defrocked if I declare myself a bishop. My bishop may be seeing me now. I'm a priest in the Anglican Church, so I don't want to be defrocked. I'm not a bishop. But the question about what then is the church doing, the fact that the conversation is happening is a good thing. The fact that we are talking about it is a good thing. The fact that we are seated here talking about it is a good thing. Even in the church currently, there is conversation going on. Whichever way it is going, right or far right, left or far left, whichever way it is something that I cannot control. But the fact that it is happening is a good thing. But to answer Barbara, lots of things are going on. There are lots of toolkits developed by different religious communities to talk about issues of diverse sexualities. There are many. Some are so plenty in the internet, and still inviting us to go and check what those groups are talking about. My role about how then do we shift the norm. And yesterday as I was preparing to do this, somebody told me something that I really liked, and I think I wanted to tweet it today, but I forgot. He said that the fact that it is common does not mean it is normal. And the fact that it is not common does not say it is abnormal. And for me, that was a good way to begin to talk about norm shifting. Why do we even call it a norm? Who constructed that norm? Why does it exist? And ask questions behind it to be able to come to a place where we agree that norms are constructed and can be deconstructed. Finally, people looking for language in African cultures, indigenous knowledge forms, I am with you in that journey. But quickly, I have discovered things that then our quest for language have invisibilized. While we are looking at language, in our looking, we find real lives. And so we keep looking for how do we call diversity in our African languages. As we're looking for that, go to many communities in our African context. There are real lives, real people who expressed differently. And so for me, I have quit the struggle for language, and I'm keeping looking for people. Looking for real people, real experiences, because they exist. For me, I think the avenue and the pathway of finding the language would be to find the people and keep asking questions. How then did they present? How did they talk about themselves? So look for people, look for real experiences and not language. And the final thing that I want to say is what Ngari asked about fornication, about adultery, what he said about homosexuality. Most of these things are what I would call, for lack of a better language, sexuality and all its cognate terms, bisexuality, homo, whatever it is, all of them are things that are very recent, coming from European modernity. And even in the Bible, those words did not exist. Remember, the Bible was not written in English, it was written in Greek and Hebrew. And looking for those words in Greek and Hebrew, what they meant then and what they've been made to be today is different. I know I'm saying this and people are watching and they're wondering, which Bible do I use? The same Bible that all of us read. And I invite us to go beyond English.
Let's be good students. Go to Hebrew that wrote the first scripture in Old Testament. Go to Greek and you'll find different things. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll begin with Lucy. Yeah, she asked a number of questions, but I'll try and group them. One, is there anything like legal immorality? I'll be very afraid to call it legal immorality, but I'll be open to call it the constitutional immorality because we can pinpoint it to a specific place. When we were challenging the decision of the NGO Coordination Board to register the LGBTQ NGO in Kenya, the main argument of the board and the state, it was about the societal immorality. But if you look at the Court of Appeal and Justice Martha Koome, who is now the CJ, said that we have what we can call as our constitutional immorality. And she said we can get this from the values which are in our constitution. So these values entail the values such as the dignity. Our morality is to how to treat a person as a human, how to preserve the worthiness of that individual. Then the other one is the value of equality, that I want to treat you as an equal to me, that we are not better off than that group. So yeah, so there are those values that are in the constitution, so I'll be open to calling them constitutional immorality. And the term minority, for me I think that it is all encompassing, that it is able to take care of even a new group that is emerging. So it will be very unfair to clothe it to limit it to a specific thing, but it is better if you just leave it as a minority group or a marginalized group. And to Barbara, are we moving towards decriminalization in Kenya, such as in Angola, Mauritius, or are we going to harsher times, such as in Uganda? There are two routes or three routes to decriminalization. It can either be by the constitution itself, or the legislature itself amending the law, or the courts. In Angola, they use the parliament route. It's the parliament who abolished the criminalization. In Kenya Parliament, that one it will be tough. So we only have hopes in the judiciary, and I've said that there is an appeal at the Court of Appeal. We will see how that goes. But I'm very sure that we can't go to the days of Uganda. And finally, on Sodom and Gomorrah, I am not a good reader of the Bible. But I think that there's a verse there that says that if you have not sinned, be the first to throw a stone. Yeah, thank you.
You know why I like these panelists? Because they answer all the questions. I have one. And that was the one about colonialism or co-opting. At some point you will color me a conspiracy theorist, because by dint of what I do, my work compels me to look for and join dots. I have to. Otherwise, yeah. So when I join dots, what I see is, you know how the missionaries came on a ship and they were sent by the king and the queen and whatever of wherever, right? And they came on the ship. These are the ones that have come on the ship. Madam, please may I look at this man? These are the ships. They're just bringing the message to prepare the land. Do you feel what I'm saying? Without saying too much. Look at COVID. Look at the way COVID played out. Look at various things around pharmaceuticals. Look, that is a topic for another day. Or lunchtime. Sasa, but can you see where I'm coming from? There's no co-opting going on here. These are the ships. We need to be well prepared.
Thank you for that roundup. I will just say, people present, if you will join me in closing this session, Language of Morality, Morality of Language, from three fabulous and extremely knowledgeable panelists. I am proud to have my name labeled next to yours. Let us give them a standing ovation. They've done wonderfully, if you may. Standing ovation. You want to lead the factorial clap? Do you know it? We start at 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Thank you.
And as our very, very able panelists are sitting down, we have to acknowledge that we had an amazing moderator. Anapeleka maswali na prompts in a way that is morally African. And I just wish we had an African sexuality and an African morally way to appreciate Dr. Kathleen. And because we are a very, very inclusive society, I would wish if we give Daktari an inclusive round of applause, not the clapping way. We can just do an amazing, cloudy round of applause to Dr. Kathleen, and then we are like taking it to her. Sawa sawa. In a count of 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. And when it's all been said and done, kilicho na mwanzo hakikosi kuwa na mwisho. And as I wrap this up, I am honored to call the Deputy Executive Director of the KELIN, and Hortense Minishi, tafadhali, take the floor to give us closing remarks, and just thanking our crowd for being here. Also, let's appreciate her as she comes. Thank you.
Our esteemed panelists, speakers, our hosts, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Hortense Minishi, and I'm here on behalf of the Executive Director of KELIN to give just a vote of thanks, as well as appreciate you for being here today. I would just like to say, I think our conversations today reflect something within our community. If we were to give African sexualities, if we were to think of a vegetable that would, depict what African sexuality is, I think we would choose an onion. There are so many layers to what African sexuality is. And today we try to pick on some of them: language, culture, religion, law, attitudes, beliefs, values. All of them impact how we choose to view our own sexuality and the sexuality of others. But where the rubber meets the road is when we're looking at those values, those attitudes, the languages, and the beliefs, and they impact the rights of others. What is moral? What is good? What is bad? And who makes those decisions? By whose standards are we making those decisions? So I'm grateful that we had an opportunity to interrogate these intricacies, the nuances, the dilemmas, the paradoxes that face us. In all these opportunities in our dialogues, we want to encourage open conversations because that's the only way we can find solutions to move us forward. So allow me again to give a heartfelt gratitude to all of you for joining us for this conversation. It's been insightful, it's been engaging because of your interactive discussions, your questions, the way you've pondered through the dilemmas that face our society today. But even as we speak about society, are we not part of it? So the challenges that face us today and the solutions start with you and me. To our hosts, the University of Nairobi, to the Dean, Dr. Patrick Nyabul, Dr. Francis Owaka, Professor Githaka Wamberia, our speakers, Reverend Godfrey, Mr. Joshua Malizo, Ms. Lorna Diaz, we thank you for your contributions to this discussion. The questions you asked, the contributions you gave are invaluable. And I think it's given us an opportunity to learn and relearn. Thank you all to the guests present for your active participation and thoughtful questions. You made this conversation dynamic and interactive, and it brought out one thing: the diversity within our society. In moving forward, I want to also acknowledge the planning team for this meeting, the organizations that were involved, Kelin, Tika, the Center for Human Rights and Peace, CRR, Katiba, and GALC. Together we can make a difference. And even as we move forward, we want to encourage a chance for us to have conversations that bring out the intersectionality of what African sexuality is. So be it with the researchers, with the religious leaders, with the legal experts, with the government, with the minorities, let us all come together to discuss and forge our way forward. Asanteni.
Thank you so much. And on that note, can we all stand and share with each other a nice handshake as we walk down for a nice meal? Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Asanteni. Oh, is it walking up or down? We are walking up now, sorry.